As investigators piece together what happened in connection with the death of Nolan Wells, you have his friends raising legal defense money, Nolan's mom reportedly being investigated for professional misconduct, the signs of potential litigation mounting. What exactly is going on right now? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So there are some things happening with the Nolan Wells case that we should talk about. This is the death of the 18-year-old college football player, went missing after a July 4th boating trip at the Barrier Island off of Horn Island in Mississippi, reportedly didn't go back on the boat with his friends, goes missing, and his body is found 2 days later washed ashore. The family is demanding a thorough investigation. They are demanding answers. They have hired attorney Ben Crump to navigate this situation for them. They ordered an independent autopsy of Nolan's body, but the cause and manner of death were undetermined. From that examination, we do know, based on reporting, the official state medical examination has reportedly been completed, presumably with the toxicology report, but we don't know the results yet. It's part of a larger case file that will, by all accounts, be sent to a grand jury for potential filing of criminal charges. The results won't be released till then, and we have no timeline on when this grand jury process will happen. Now, before I go any further, if you want more details about the Nolan Wells case, if you want to actually look at all the documents that we have so far in this, see them for yourselves, you can go on the Law&Crime Plus app. We have a case file section. It says Nolan Wells. We have all that information up there. And by the way, this is for a lot of different stories that we follow. It's all in the case files on the Law&Crime Plus app. We're opening up the evidence vault so you can inspect the raw body cam footage, the 911 calls, the crime scene photos, the full trial tapes firsthand, because sometimes we're limited in how much we can show here. Plus, also when you go on the Law&Crime Plus app, you get ad-free streaming of all your favorite Law & Crime and court TV shows, so you can see the full picture for an entire month free. Head on over to lawandcrimeplus.com, enter the promo code SIDEBAR, and you're going to start exploring all of that today. Hope you can check it out. Okay, back to Nolan Wells. Is the family being shut out? Are they being silenced? Are they being intimidated? What are their legal rights for information? What are their legal rights against others? What are their legal rights to speak out, give their take on the evidence, the investigation? What about those who are claiming they are being victimized? And it is getting heated. It's been reported that right now 3 people have been criminally charged with making threats in connection with this case. And these suspects don't seem to know the family personally or to be involved in any way. But these alleged threats against a judge whose son was with Nolan that day, a witness, local officials, this is getting serious. This is taking on a life of its own. And now you're also seeing the prospect of litigation. You're seeing a legal defense fund being raised, which we're going to talk about. You're seeing Nolan's mom reportedly being hit with a professional complaint. There is a lot to talk about, especially when it comes to Ben Crump's role, Nolan's purported friends. The question becomes, is there a line? What is the line? Has anyone crossed the line? A lot of moving parts about this, so I want to talk about it. Okay, so this is where I bring in Rich Schoenstein, okay, litigator who knows the ins and outs of things like this. Rich, thank you so much for coming on. It's good to see you. There's a lot I want to talk to you about, but I got to start with this because this is like the latest breaking news, big news that came out. According to outlets such as WLBT, the Mississippi Board of Nursing has apparently launched this professional misconduct investigation against Nolan's mom, Christine Wells Wonsley. And apparently there was an anonymous complaint. Well, Ben Crump, who I've mentioned represents the Wells family, said that this was, quote, a warning shot to essentially intimidate Christine Wonsley and keep her quiet about looking into what happened with her son. Highlights that she has never had a complaint before. He said, quote, attacking a grieving mother's career does not answer the question of what happened to Nolan. It tells us the question matters and the answer is scaring somebody. We will keep asking questions and demanding the facts until Christine knows how her son died. I should note that Christine posted on Facebook that the Mississippi Board of Nursing has now closed this professional misconduct case, saying, quote, thank you to all of those who have constantly kept us in your prayers. This definitely has added more hurt to an already devastating time because I love my job and I love my patients. Now, Rich, reason I wanted to bring you on is there's a lot of civil components to this. There's a lot of ways that the legal system is being used here. And I think about this, whether the allegations in that anonymous complaint were true or not. It seems, it being dropped, it probably weren't. But the timing of it is suspicious. Does Ben Crump have a point about this, about potentially weaponizing different legal systems in this search for the truth?
Well, I think you have to say that the timing is at least suspicious. If it's true that she's never had a complaint lodged against her throughout her career, and all of a sudden there's an investigation into the death of her son and there's public interest, and all of a sudden there's an anonymous complaint out of the blue, you would say at least that timing is suspicious and that complaint needs to be scrutinized.
Does it? To me, it supports the argument. This is why the family got outside counsel. This is why they've moved forward with an independent investigation, because the idea would be that they are vulnerable. They are vulnerable to, I think the argument is that this could have been all swept up under the rug, that it was going to be a quick investigation, that, what happened to Nolan, tragic accident. But to get a lawyer and to bring a spotlight on this and to protect their rights, I'm still navigating, the role of an attorney like Ben Crump in all this, but I'm also not, I can't deny there is a value to that.
Oh, absolutely. And I've represented victims, family victims of crimes before, and they need legal representation, especially in today's day and age when they're likely to be subject to attacks on social media or the internet, or someone's going to lodge in a complaint to the board of whatever, or they're going to have to consider if they have claims that they should bring on behalf of the estate or on behalf of the family, or more fundamentally to your point, they want someone, an advocate of their own, looking over the investigation or even conducting their own investigation. There are a lot of perfectly good reasons that the family of a victim should get legal assistance. I have no problem with that.
I've talked about this before. People are getting arrested for making threats. The family has talked about being harassed. The purported friends of Nolan claim that they're getting harassed, which I'm going to get into a little bit more. But have you seen anything like this before? There's one thing. It's an investigation to find out what happened to Nolan, and now you're seeing lawyers getting involved and people lawyering up and maybe mounting legal claims against each other because of the discourse out there, because of the dialogue, because of the theories, the rumors, the speculation, how loud it's getting. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Yeah, I think we see. I think we see more and more of it. I will reference the Karen Reed case where there were, lots of attacks against people who presumably were simply witnesses, and all kinds of theories on the internet about what might have really happened. And at the end of the day, a lot of those people have had to lawyer up. But if you are a potential suspect, you ought to have a lawyer. If you're going to be asked to talk to the authorities and the authorities might view you as a potential suspect, you ought to have a lawyer. If you have some independent legal stake in the matter, you should have a lawyer. If you might be getting attacked and defamed out there in the world, you should consider legal representation. There are lots of good reasons. And I think we do see this in a lot of cases now.
And also, I think having a lawyer, if you are going to go public with your questions, if you're going to go public with combating narratives out there or questioning the evidence, how you say it, is something that's good to have a lawyer look through, which brings me to this point. Has the family done anything or said anything that could get them into legal trouble? Has Ben Crump said anything or done anything that could get him into legal trouble? I mean, look, they've been vocal. And for example, they have pushed back on accounts that Nolan would have stayed on Horn Island without his friends, which is something that has, been amplified by those who were with Nolan that day. They have made claims that information from Nolan's phone may have been tampered with, deleted. They have seemingly pushed back on the idea of whether Trayston Shepard, who has come out, claims he's a good friend, a really good friend of Nolan. He was interviewed by Brandon Tatum. On Cuomo, on News Nation, Chris had asked Elmore Wonsley, Nolan's father, if he knows Trayston, and said, no, I don't. just because you park your vehicle in someone's yard doesn't mean that they have to know you. And then there was this. So it was reported, and we talked about this, that according to preliminary information from a document from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, witnesses reportedly told investigators that Nolan had been drinking heavily with friends that day before he went missing. This was reported by ABC News. Well, Christine, his mom, goes on the Don Lemon show and denies this, says, if you were in our situation, how would you feel if there were millions of people who were saying, oh, hey, well, he was at an island, he was heavily drunk. And I'm like, but was he though? Or is this a narrative that you guys want to use? And she even apparently said that one of Nolan's football coaches told her that he saw Nolan that day between 2:45 p.m., 3:30 p.m. local time. Quote, he was like, Christine, yeah, we talked for a while. We talked about college. We talked about his life, his plans. And he was like, he was perfectly fine. Because I think it had bothered him, too, that there was this narrative of, oh, he was sloppy drunk. So what do you, big question, overall picture I have here, Rich, I just wanted to lay some of this out. As they're talking about this, as they're commenting on this, is there anything that gives you concern for the family or Ben Crump about what they're saying?
I haven't watched a lot of what Ben Crump has said. I know about it, and I know that he's drawn some criticism for some of his comments. So let me start with this premise. From the point of view of the investigation, it would be preferable to me if the family wasn't making a lot of public comments, because I think talking about evidence publicly can potentially interfere with an investigation. Investigators don't tell you everything they found every day during an investigation. They do it step by step. They do it methodically. They talk to witnesses. They look at forensics. They look at evidence. And ultimately, when they draw conclusions, they coordinate with law enforcement, and either something gets, charges are brought or they're not. But you're not entitled to an hour by hour update. And I know that we have loads of content creators, that want to report this story and bring news about what really happened. And so Don Lemon's doing that, and Chris is doing that. To some extent, you're doing it. And there are a lot of other people doing it that have a legitimate interest in reporting what they find. So what I would say is and I understand that the family wants to combat public narratives it views as offensive. So if there's a public narrative, well, he must have been drunk on the island, and they believe that is not true, I totally understand why they would want to speak out against that. And I just think everybody should proceed with the same goal in mind. The goal is to determine how this young man died and figure out if anybody is responsible that needs to be charged for that. And everything that's done ought to hopefully contribute, or at least not detract from that goal.
So look, you and I both know that there are people in the public, online, who are viewing this in multiple ways. And the family and Ben Crump have been getting criticism, and we've seen, the friends getting criticism. And there's something that I have to call out here that I thought was really interesting. So apparently Nolan's purported friends and their families have launched this legal defense fund on Give, Send, Go, currently raised at the time of this recording over $158,000. I'm going to read you a portion of what it says. It says, quote, no friend should have to grieve the loss of a brother, but instead of being allowed to mourn, what followed was an unprecedented online campaign of accusations, harassment, threats, and defamation. Since Nolan's death, Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, Morgan Seymour, and many others have been inundated with death threats, threats of violence, and defamation. They have been falsely and wrongly blamed by individuals online and in the media of either directly or indirectly having a hand in Nolan's death. Most of them could not even attend their own best friend's funeral. Why? Because race baiters sent a deranged army after them online in the name of justice. Since the beginning of the investigation, these young men have cooperated with authorities, turned over all the information they had, and provided an overwhelming number of witnesses accounting for their whereabouts. Some of them even resorted to speaking up publicly to defend themselves against baseless allegations. But unfortunately, it has become clear that the truth doesn't matter. It goes on to say, lives have been turned upside down, and some have had to go into hiding. Al Sharpton, Ben Crump, and the usual suspects of social media personalities, national news media, and local provocateurs continue to invent and spread false narratives and lies with no accountability. This is the typical tactic of Ben Crump and the like. They come to communities like the Gulf Coast under the guise of seeking justice, but it has become painfully clear that their version of justice is stirring division, ruining lives, and then leaving when the money is dried up. We have seen this same pattern time and time again, most recently during the Carmelo Anthony trial. No matter what anyone believes about an ongoing investigation, our legal system exists for a reason. Evidence belongs in the hands of law enforcement and the courts, and not in online mob campaigns fueled by rumors, edited clips, edited audio, speculation, or misinformation. This must stop. This fund is created for the sole purpose of fighting these individuals. Our goal is simple and twofold. Our first goal is to raise money to defend these friends against incoming wrongful death actions filed by attorney Ben Crump and his team. Our second goal is to fund a robust legal team to sue for the litany of slander and libel being spread by not only Crump, but also many social media influencers, news outlets, and local provocateurs who know better. This is not about silencing legitimate discussion or respectful disagreement. People are free to ask questions and express opinions. This is about drawing a line against defamation, targeted harassment, threats of violence, doxing, intimidation, and coordinated campaigns that destroy lives before the facts are known. It goes on to say, your donation says that enough is enough. Your donation says that the time of exploiting a tragedy under the guise of justice and leaving a community in ruins after squeezing as much money out of it as possible is over. Nolan deserved dignity, not this. Rich, there's a lot to get into with this. I mean, we can start with the idea of a fund being set up with all that money coming in. We can start about what the goal is, what the line is. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts because you covered a lot of ground. You covered a lot of ground there, my friend. But let me start with the fund, okay? Because again, this is something we're seeing now. You know, Luigi Mangione has raised $1.5 million in his legal defense fund, right?
Very different. Very different.
I understand, but I'm saying a lot of people, either defendants or victims or others, set up these funds. And one thing I want to encourage people is when they look at a fund like that, to try to scrutinize it and make sure you know where your money's going before you give it, because there's not a lot of control. Once you give $100 to some give, send, go, you don't have any control over what that money is really used for. So you want to really take a look at that fund and make sure that it's being used for things you want it to be used for. I find the idea that people would attack these other young men who were on this trip without knowing any facts, and I know that that's happened. I don't think that's right. I think they have a valid point there that they shouldn't be attacked. Nobody should assume there's a racial component to this unless there's evidence to support that. And the fact that there are people of different races is not enough fact to support that there's a racial component, right? So I don't want to see that jump to conclusion. I don't like a lot of speculation about who must have done what, or this must have happened, or it had to be this way, because you don't know. Now, you mentioned that the other guys who were on the boat have been cooperating with authorities. That's what I understand. That's what I've heard, that they have been answering questions posed to them by authorities. I haven't heard anything about people not cooperating or refusing to answer questions, and that's a good sign. They should be credited for that. And of course, it should be investigated, because even if they are cooperating, it doesn't mean that somebody didn't do something wrong, and we have to try to get to the truth.
The interesting thing about it is, if they are going proactively, right? They're not staying quiet. They're not saying, the fact that they're proactively saying, we're going to lawyer up, okay? We will fight this, okay? This is what we did. It seems to me, it supports an argument they're being credible, because why would you want this in a courtroom where if you are hiding something or you aren't telling the truth, that would be exposed during the course of the litigation, right?
Yeah, again, I have no problem with any of these people getting lawyers.
Right, right, right.
If you're a witness in a high profile potential crime, by the way, we don't even know that there's a crime here. We just know, unfortunately, that somebody died
Yeah.
tragically. We don't know that there's a crime. We don't know that there's a perpetrator. But if you're involved in that and there's public attention and you're being questioned by the authorities and there are people throwing things at you online or emailing you threats or whatever, you should get a lawyer. And if that's not something you can readily afford because we're expensive, then I have no problem with crowdsourcing the funding for that either. That's a perfectly legitimate thing to do, is to reach out for assistance to fund that effort, right? So I'm just saying, make sure that's really what you're contributing to. If you're contributing to such a thing, make sure you know what you're contributing to. But I have no problem with them doing it. I certainly have no problem with them getting a lawyer. And I don't think, if anybody wants to jump to a conclusion that if you lawyered up, you must have done something wrong. I mean, go back to school. Aren't we over that?
Yeah. Well, it is interesting that they say the first purpose is to defend against a wrongful death action, almost as if they believe, if the way I'm reading it, that Nolan's family would sue, right? Because there are kind of hints, right? Nolan's mom has appeared to file these subpoenas for records from social media companies, TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Meta, Life 360. This is part of the legal case regarding the estate of Nolan Wells, seeks all this kind of information. It was also reported by People magazine that a preservation notice for evidence was sent by Nolan's family to the families of Nolan's friends, these investigative bodies. Apparently, according to People and ABC News, one was sent to Ashley Cole, this judge who I mentioned before, whose son was reportedly with Nolan Wells that day. So it seems there's a possibility when you hire Ben Crump and you're having this information, these notices, they may be preparing to go the wrongful death route to get the answers that they feel they may not get in the criminal investigation, right?
Well, to get answers, right, and also to get financial recovery. I mean, when if you have multiple people out there, it's not impossible that the families of some of these kids have insurance that would cover that kind of litigation. It's not impossible that you could cast a wide net wrongful death action with a bunch of defendants and find some that have some financial wherewithal and piece together a recovery. You could probably frame a complaint even if nobody killed him or did anything intentionally. You can probably assert negligence. Why'd they leave him alone on the island? They shouldn't have left without him. That was negligent. That helped lead to his death. So an attorney could pursue wrongful death litigation in the hope of either coming up with the real answers of what happened or getting some sort of financial recovery for the family, or both.
Mm. And let me just ask you this again. What is the line between asking questions, giving an opinion, free speech versus defamation?
Well, I'm going to assume it's speech publicly. So if you say something in a court document, it generally is entitled to absolute privilege and cannot be a defamation. So if you file a complaint, or by the way, if you file a complaint with the Mississippi Board of Health, that's probably privileged too. You're probably not going to be sued for defamation about that. So the first question is where did you make the speech? How did you make the speech? Now let's assume you made it publicly. You made it over the internet, or you stood up on a street corner. Then the question is going to be, are you making statements of fact or opinions? If you say, I know that this individual was responsible for the death, that is a factual assertion. That can be defamatory. You're accusing somebody of a crime. If you say, my view, in my opinion, is this investigation isn't looking hard enough at the evidence. The investigation ought to consider this, that, and the other thing and really probe. That is more opinion. You're not necessarily saying that as a factual matter anybody did anything. You're simply offering opinion, and opinions generally cannot be defamatory. I mean, that's a very simplistic view. And as you know, because you've looked at a lot of these cases, a lot of statements are really on that line between are they opinion or factual?
Yeah, that's why we have trials for it. And just to put it into perspective, we've talked about this before, but there was an apparent friend of Nolan Wells, Bart Edmondson Jr., planning on taking legal action because some have speculated online or accused him of being somehow involved or connected to what happened to Nolan. He retained an attorney, Russell Latino, who released a statement to Law&Crime saying after, and this was, we've talked about this before, but after a week of egregiously false and defamatory accusations against Bart Edmondson Jr., accusations which resulted in credible death threats now being investigated by the FBI, the Edmondson family has released a statement addressing their son's knowledge of and cooperation in the Nolan Wells investigation. And he actually sent us a copy of a cease and desist letter that he apparently sent to an online influencer for allegedly spreading misinformation. So, one of the things I also think as we wrap things up, we don't know if there's a crime here. We don't know if there's going to be criminal charges. But what's interesting is if this were to advance to somehow the authorities believing that someone was involved in Nolan's death or that someone allegedly committed a crime in connection with the investigation, what you and I both know when any witness is on the stand and being questioned, if they have any civil action, if they have any lawsuit, that is prime ground for questioning, isn't it? And that complicates matters of credibility and really getting to the truth of what happened.
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, you really want to wait if you can until after the criminal proceedings are over, if there are any, to bring civil litigation. So if you're going to be a witness and you can wait, you have to worry about statute of limitations, which can be kind of quick on things like wrongful death actions. But you may want to hold your powder on your civil case until you've done all your testifying in a criminal case, precisely to avoid the kind of thing you're talking about. And also because you can't really proceed with civil litigation until the criminal component is done. If you're suing people who face criminal charges, they won't appear for a deposition or make any progress in the civil case until the criminal case is over.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.